Welcome back, and this is episode 2 of the July 8th edition of Issues That Matter. And I have my guest co-host, Catherine Ann Mossman, and our guest, Peter Damasio.
Very good.
I did not even refresh my paper.
Yeah.
I'm proud of myself. Good boy. We're here to do segment 2 of human trafficking, and the first segment dealt much with sexual human trafficking, which certainly is worthy of discussion. But there are other areas of human trafficking that are equally worthy of discussion, and it is a pervasive factor in our society. And due to the rural nature of the state of Maine, one might be able to say maybe a little bit more pervasive in this state than it is in a lot of other states. And with that, I'm going to kick it back over to Catherine.
So where we left off on the part 1,
We were on a cliff, right?
We were on a
cliff,
right? We left them hanging. So we were talking about Johns and survivors or women who are prostituting, and I asked you, what can we do to deter the men from doing it? And you said, funny you should ask that question, Catherine, because it was the abolitionists. Go.
So the Abolitionist Network, they conducted a research study in 2011 asking the Johns what would prevent them from buying sex. And the list was this long. And on that list was increase penalties, financial penalties to $2,000 or greater. Hit them where it hurts. Hit them where they're spending the money. Confiscate their vehicles. They're getting there in their cars, so it's part of the criminal act.
Right.
Confiscate their vehicles. This is coming from them. The other thing was put their names and their photographs in the newspapers, on bulletin boards, write letters home to their families about what happened, and the list goes on. So these are some of the things that they're telling us would curtail them. So
we should be doing what they say.
Why aren't we listening to them?
Right. I used to do that with the kids for punishment. I would say, okay, what do you think your punishment should be? And it was frequently greater than what I would have done.
Yeah.
But I like that. If that would deter them from buying, it's need. If there weren't buyers, people wouldn't be buying.
So and that's a way around the question that you asked. Well, how do we do it without the kids being brought into this and them getting bullied at school? Well, you don't need to put their names in the paper or their pictures in the paper. You just hit them with a significant dollar amount fine.
Right.
And you also confiscate their vehicle.
Right.
And no one else has to know any better.
Right.
But, the other skeptics will say, well, we need to raise an awareness about this, that it's happening, and who is contributing to this as well. Yeah, I see their point too. But also, do you really want to bring kids into this that are innocent and haven't hurt anybody,
right,
and open them up to, things going on at school? And you said the bullying. I mean,
right,
kids can be pretty mean to one another at the expense of something their father might have done.
Right.
So you have to look at it from both sides and what is going to be the effects of it, and who is it going to hurt even more?
People will say, is this new? Is this happening a lot more than before? And my answer to that is child sexual assault is as old as time. And as long as they are human beings, children have been sexually assaulted. But the sex trafficking part, the minors and young people trading sex for a gain, there is an increase or resurgence in that, and that's because of opportunity, the resources that are available now because of the internet, and because of money. And you've spoken before, and I'd love for you to speak again on the financial gain, the motivator force being finances and what the finances look like.
Well, I just saw a statistic last week, and it was put out by the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime. And in that stat, it called human trafficking the second largest and fastest growing criminal enterprise, human trafficking. Globally, it's estimated to have made $150 billion. $99 billion of that comes from sex trafficking, selling individuals for sex, and that's globally. And that again was put out by the United Nations on Office on Drugs and Crime.
Do they break it down by country by chance?
I don't believe they do, because you're not going to get a real, these are all estimates, because you have some countries that don't even comply with the Trafficking in Persons report. So
Here in America, you gave a great analogy that was user-friendly language when you were comparing the different businesses for the annual income. Nike.
oh yeah, it's, yeah, well, back then, you know, it's even greater today, but back then it was more than Google, Nike, and Starbucks combined as far as what they were bringing as far as money. And that's a lot of money.
That's a lot of money.
And it's being made off the backs of innocent, vulnerable people.
Right.
And you know, and children are a part of that. And unfortunately, you know, kids are innocent. Kids are looked at, you know, respect adults, listen to what they say. We have adults who are teachers, instructors who kids look up to, who have also been predators and perpetrators. So the predators and perpetrators can be anybody, and the victims can be anybody. A victim of trafficking, whether it be, you know, human sex trafficking, domestic servitude, labor trafficking, whatever, a victim can come from any walk of life. They can come from a family that is living in poverty, or they can come from a wealthy family as well.
Now, I now have a heightened awareness of the existence of human trafficking. I see something that just doesn't look right. Who do I call?
I'm going to tell you to call your local law enforcement first, because they need to be aware that this is happening in their community. Because unfortunately, you still do have some law enforcement officers out there who don't think this is happening. And if they're not getting the calls that, hey, I see this,
They're never going to wake up to it.
they're not going to wake up to it. They're just going to, it's just going to reinforce that it's not happening here.
Well, and the phone call thing that was brought up on that conference that you and I were at on child welfare, when you call the Department of Human Services or you call your local police, it's really important to make that call even if you're unsure, and almost even more important if you're not sure to make that call, because they're keeping track of how many people are calling and what are the names that are being used. And it's like a jigsaw puzzle, and they start to put the pieces together. Wow, this person's name keeps being brought up. This particular car seen in the area keeps being brought up. And it starts collecting the evidence. So that gut feeling that I'm really not sure if something's going on, but you know, she's 14 and has a coach person, her mother is a nurse, you know, it just doesn't make sense. And so making that call is really important. I want to segue into something that we had learned, that I had taken a class from you on. I don't know how to get on a chat room. You know, if you put a gun to my head and you said, get on a chat room, I don't, you know, I can barely, sometimes I can get something up on Instagram of my cute dog or something. I can barely function on Facebook. I don't know how to do it, you know, and I'm 52. So when I was learning about the cyber stuff, and I had asked you previously, I'm like, what is the most important thing? If there was one message that if you had the opportunity to speak to the entire state of Maine, what is it that you would want to say? And you told me the cyber story. I'd love for you to tell that pediatrician story.
Yeah.
And then talk about the cyber side of things in the language that people like me who can't figure stuff out would understand.
No, you can't get on a chat room.
And I don't want to get on the chat room, particularly after everything I've learned.
I think if there's an important message to get out there, it's for parents to know what their kids are doing online, who they're talking to, what sites they're visiting, because that's where the chat rooms are located. There's many different websites that perpetrators are recruiting kids from. Nowadays, a kid can be a victim without ever leaving their bedroom because that predator can reach right through their screen and get them. The computer is the key to the house. You can let a predator in just through the screen on the computer. And just going back, I'm going to date myself here too, going back into the days of AOL, when we had AOL and you had the buddy list.
You've got mail.
You got mail. You had the buddy list, and my youngest daughter, we had, and I think this is important too, put the computer in a room that's accessible to the entire family. Don't have it isolated in a kid's bedroom where they can do whatever they want to do. Put it in a strategic location in the house where everybody can, in their passing, can look over the shoulder and see what's going on.
In today's vernacular, the AOL buddy list might be analogous to the friend list on
Absolutely.
Facebook.
Absolutely.
Exactly.
It is. Yeah.
Exactly. So going back to the AOL buddy list, our computer at the time was in our office, so everybody used the office at the house. And I just happened to be in there, and I looked over at my daughter on the computer, and I looked at her buddy list, and she had, now mind you, she's 14 years old at the time, 3,467 friends on her buddy list. I was like, how do you know 3,467 people?
Right.
So for the next 3.5, 4 hours, I sat there with her and went through every single name on that list. How do you know this person? Well, I know this person through so-and-so. Well, where do they live? Oh, Chicago. Well, you're here in Dedham, Massachusetts. Delete.
Yeah, yeah, right.
How do you know this person? Well, I know this person through so-and-so. Have you ever met them? No. Where do they live? Oh, they live in Hawaii. Delete.
Delete.
So by the time we got through that list, we were down to like 67 friends that she actually knew and had met. Because on the internet, anyone can be anyone. You can say anything. You can go on the internet and say you're a 16-year-old boy looking for a girlfriend. In reality, what, you're 38 years old?
Yeah.
You're
38. He's saying 38.
You're 38,
Yep.
right? So
So they were saying that Facebook is like the, correct me, so that Facebook is like a way that a predator can pick kids. So a predator can say, okay, and then friend that kid, friend the friends of that kid, to make them look more, and I'm saying on purpose, genetically, it could be male, female, saying them, him or her, and then luring them to one of the chat rooms, because the Facebook, the Homeland Security can trace pictures, can trace IP addresses, but if you go to these other things, like I just deleted Snapchat, but there's these other applications like Snapchat, and then you guys had a whole list of them at the conference. I was like, oh my God, I didn't even know what all those were. But those things are called a chat application, and the chat application means that a picture can come up, and then it deletes itself if you don't take a picture of it with your phone. Right. And so because of that, there's no IP address, so a villain can do bad things on these chat applications and the chances of them getting caught or prosecuted, if you know for sure they're doing something bad, is far less. Mm-hmm. And the predator knows this, so they want to pick their people, then lure them into these chat things, and then manipulate them to do something inappropriate. Pretend, you're a 16-year-old boy, and this is my girlfriend, she's topless. Do yours look as big as hers? Send me a picture. She thinks she's just comparing. She sends him a picture. He can press whatever on his phone to save that picture, and he starts collecting pictures, so now he can be whoever he wants to on his whole deck of cards
just pick who he wants to
pictures, and then go even further into debauchery.
It's an endless web.
Yeah, it is.
Well,
and it is an endless web.
And as much as people, and I venture to say a lot of the older people, they shy away from the computer. But if you have the computer in your house, whether you are active on that computer or not, the computer is in your house. That is a gateway to your house, and you need to know at least some of the fundamental basics of the intelligence world out there.
Well, that's why we're
especially if you
saying
have-
having this conversation.
Especially if you have kids that are living in the house with you, because the
Right.
kids are going to be on the computer
Yeah.
all the time doing their thing. And they're going to be exploring their websites, they're going to be talking to their friends, they're going to be probably talking to predators that are passing themselves off
Right.
as 14 and 15-year-old kids just to start grooming them
Right.
into getting them to do what they want to do. And,
So was that right? Did I explain that
yeah,
right?
absolutely. And that
Okay.
leads into, the story about this individual who was passing himself off as a kid in a chat room, telling the kids that, hey, your IP address is showing. And an IP address on a computer actually shows your location, where that computer is physically. So he was tell the kids, hey, your IP address is showing. I can send you a program that would hide that so people don't see where you're located. He'll then send them the program for them to download. After it's downloaded, the kid will say, I got it downloaded, now what? That's when the tables turn. That's when this person
Now
says,
they're
well,
connected.
I just gave you a virus.
Yep.
If you don't do what I tell you to do, I'm going to activate the virus and destroy your computer.
They're not really connected.
And where do kids get their computers from today? They don't buy them
Parents.
themselves. They usually get them from parents. And of course, they're going to comply with what that person wants, because the last thing they want is to tell their parents their computer has been destroyed. So he then gets them to go over to Skype. Are you familiar with
Yeah,
Skype?
yeah.
Okay.
Do it with the kids.
Yeah, to
but
do it with the
FaceTime
kids.
is easier because the Skype is too complicated.
Well, yeah. So then he got them to go over to Skype, and he could see them, but they couldn't see him. And he would start to get them to do sexual things through Skype with their bodies. He'd be videotaping it. He'd be taking photographs of it, and again saving it into a file. If there were brothers and sisters in the house, he would try to get that kid, that boy, the girl, to try and recruit the brothers and sisters in on it as well. Okay.
I would like to make the point that, and you're absolutely right.
Well, he's telling you.
What I would caution people about is, we've mentioned some names of programs that are out there: Skype, Facebook, AOL. These programs are not evil in and of themselves.
No.
It's the utilization of the program that's evil. So what I would caution people to think about, or to not think about, is don't look upon these programs as being evil in and of themselves. Look upon them as being access to evil if they're used in evil ways.
Well, yeah, exactly. The programs are good programs. They can be educational.
Yep.
They can be productive, but there's also someone on the other end who can use it in evil ways,
Yep.
Right.
as you said.
So he was telling us a case, a real life case right
Right.
now. So,
Yeah, so this is a
finish.
real life case. So he would get them to do these things on Skype, photographs, videos. And of course, if he's a pedophile, he's going to have other friends that are pedophiles too. He's going to send these all over the globe to his friends, and they trade pictures that way. Well, as a result of a lot of work done by our agency, we were starting to get some tips from other offices throughout the country that we might have victims here in New England. And we started identifying the victims here, kids, 14, 15, 16 years old. And in the research that our agents were doing, they discovered that this individual, this predator, was actually in Canada. He's doing this from his home in Canada. So he doesn't even have to be in the same room with this kid. And at last count, I had heard that he had over 300 victims that he did this to. And this guy was in residency to be a pediatrician, a doctor working with kids. So it just shows you that predators can be anybody. I mean, we've had predators who have been parents. We have predators who have been uncles, friends. So it can be anybody, karate instructors, you name it, whoever's working with kids, they could be a potential predator. I think you said to me, you know, in an auditorium, pick out the predator.
Right.
You can't, because they can look like the normal person on the street. But then again, what is normal today?
Right.
You know, I mean,
Good question.
it could be anybody. It can be anybody, just like a victim can be anybody.
You were talking about the some of this Skype or whatever, and that they in themselves aren't bad. Either are guns, either are cars, either are crossbows. But what is appropriate for your child? And some children are more mature and more responsible than other children, and it's up to parents and guardians of parents to understand themselves what the dangers are of these various internet applications, and then to control which ones the kids have access and don't have access to. What I have learned about chat applications, if I have an adolescent girl who's constantly doing selfies and doing the, you know, the fish face and being flirty, I would take Snapchat off her phone so fast it'd make her little head spin, because that's not, I would fear that she would be lured into something.
And the other thing too is, as I said earlier, if that computer was in a central location in the house where everybody was always passing it, would
Keeps them honest.
Would these things happen?
Right.
Maybe yes, because maybe the kid might have been alone at the time, no one else in the house because parents work, other kids are out. Maybe it might have, but it might have reduced that risk if it was in a central location. A lot of kids have computers in their rooms, laptops in their rooms. A lot of them now, as you said, can access it through their cell phones.
So
A lot of kids have laptops of their own.
Yeah.
And the chat room, which I didn't know, my grandson plays video games, and I, you know, I understood it on a surface level, but I didn't really understand it. My daughter has controls and stuff on parental controls on it, but essentially this video game, playing sports or whatever, he's playing sports against other kids or human beings all over the country, and you know, and so she has it set up where they can't talk. They can play, but they can't talk. So as a grandparent, I didn't know that they were playing against other human beings, that I was letting all these people into our home, and I didn't know that there was controls. So one of the beauty of you offering Issues That Matter and bringing these things to our audience is teaching them, because I didn't know that these things were out there. I didn't understand about the black web. I had no idea. It's like, well, if there's a bad guy, how come we can't catch them? If somebody tries to talk to my grandchild, why can't we talk to them? Well, because it was a chat application. Now I know. So bad guys, villains, predators are looking for one thing, and that's opportunity. And so they need opportunity to find out if the child is vulnerable, and then a way to interact with that child to use their vulnerability against them, to manipulate them for their own game.
It's probably not correct English, but the concept that's running through my mind is predators looking for predatees. Predators looking for people that they can take advantage of.
Well, yeah, and that's and so as guardians of children, and it takes a village, it's up to us as grandparents, parents, aunts, uncles, and the community at large in Maine to really to protect our children from the opportunity. You know, the predator's looking for an opportunity, and we have to close that gap of opportunity. And opportunities, we have to think like a predator and say, well, how's a predator going to try to get access to our children? They're going to get access to our children at Friday night roller skating rink. You know, I mean, the local mall, the Starbucks.
I have another story about malls. I mean, when you look at where kids are being recruited, they're being recruited online, they're being recruiting at the malls. They'll be recruiting at schools as well, at the high schools,
Right.
middle school level. That's where they're being recruited from. You know, I know when I was growing up, kids went to hang out at the malls. Parents drop their kids off at the malls while the parents go and do their things. But that's where a lot of things can happen.
Right. Opportunity.
One of our groups recently did a presentation at one of the high schools, and the students after the presentation came up to them and said, you need to go to this mall. We know trafficking is going on there from the kiosks that are there. We know trafficking is going on there. I had a 16-year-old girl tell the presenter that she had to duck into Victoria's Secrets to get away from the guy. So it's happening, it's happening. And what they're doing is they're picking up on that vulnerability that they might see in kids. They might see a kid by themselves, walking with his or her head down. You know, that shows maybe low self-esteem. Maybe they can work their way in that way. So many things, and if I had to say, it's parents keep an active role in what your kids are doing, who they're seeing, what websites they're accessing, who their friends are. You know, just play a more active role, because I know we're all busy, we're all running around like chickens without heads sometimes, but when it comes to our kids, that's our most precious commodity. We should know what they're doing, who their friends are, what sites they're visiting. You know, it just makes sense.
I can see it becoming easily becoming something that is so pervasive, so overwhelming. And left alone, it may well be pervasive and overwhelming.
It already is.
But if you have a heightened awareness that these things are out there, I think you might be able to avoid much of that overwhelming nature.
Absolutely.
If you just have a slight awareness,
Exactly.
so that you're not going to be blindsided.
Right, right. Because as you said earlier too, Catherine, the games, the video games, you know, yeah, you might have one of your kids who, okay, is being a pain that day, is rambunctious, is full of energy. What might you do? Set
Go
them up,
play the game.
Go play a game on the
Go
computer.
to your room.
Go use the
I'm
computer.
tired of dealing with
Well, that's
you.
where things can happen.
Right.
Or go to the mall with your friends
Yep.
for a while.
Yep.
That's where things can happen.
Yep.
You know, when they come back from the mall, check in with them. What happened at the mall? Anything unusual happen?
Well, let's talk about camps, because, you know, it's summer in Maine, and I can't tell you how
Summer
many.
yet?
It's summertime. Well, I know it's in the 60s, gray and dreary today, but it is summer. You know, I can't tell you how many times I've spoken at different places, and men will come up to me and disclose and say, boy, I'm so glad that you talk about men, because a lot of people don't. They just talk about girls being victimized, and men or boys are being victimized as well. And frequently I've heard that it's camp. I love the idea of camp. I love the idea as a parent getting a break from your kids when they go to camp. But you know, when it comes to people sending their children to camp, where can they get guidance on, you know, well, like right now we're telling you need to talk to your children before they go to camp, but what sort of, where can they learn how or what to say to kids before they go to camp? Because you're saying, you know, check in with them when they come back, but in the going to, what do you advise?
I think it's important for the parents to check the camp out thoroughly. You know, look at who the staff are. How are the staff checked out? Does the staff always, do they perform criminal background checks on their staff? Because I think that's very important if they're going to be working with kids. Because you don't want somebody who's a predator near your kids that's working there. So have they been criminally background checked? Look at the Better Business Bureau. Has this camp had any complaints against it? You know, there's so many different things that they can check about the camp. Talk to other parents that have had their kids there. What experience did your son or daughter have at the camp? Have there been any negatives that they saw or told you about? Have you seen any negatives about it? You know, so ask questions, educate themselves. And And again, I think this is what we're talking about, this entire program, is being more aware of what's going on and educating yourself on, what this is about and how to protect your kids, because that's what it comes down to, is protecting your children so they don't get harmed.
Well, and you just said this is about protecting the children, and I think sometimes folks want to have that be the children's job. So I'm going to teach the child how to protect themselves, and I think that is a part of it, but it's really not the child's job to protect themselves from the predators. Their brain isn't developed yet. In other countries, they don't even let their kids drive till they're 21 or something because the part of the brain isn't developed yet.
It's a kid's job to have fun.
It's a kid's job to have fun.
To have fun,
And
to
it's
play with
our
their
job.
friends,
Yep.
to get educated, to learn.
Yep.
It's the parents' job, it's the adults' jobs to make sure that they're safe.
Right.
I was just looking up something else I saw here from the UN. We were talking about boys.
Yep.
And it says that some estimate that 50% of commercially sexually exploited children in the United States are boys.
Yeah.
50%. But you never hear of that.
That's right.
When it comes to services for males, they're practically non-existent in the
Right.
country. There's only one safe house in the entire country for males. That just opened this year.
Yeah. So say that again, because this is so vital. There is only one safe house for boys in the entire United States.
Which just opened this year.
And it was just opened this year.
And that was met with resistance and protest. So
By the surrounding community?
From the community.
Yeah.
So realistically,
If I may ask, what was the basis of the resistance?
yeah, that's what I was just leading into. Good question.
Every so often I come up with one.
So realistically, it's not even a safe house anymore because the community knows where it's at.
Right.
So the resistance came from, well, we know these type of individuals that are living here. These boys have been sexually exploited, they've been sexually abused. We don't want the drugs coming into our community. We don't want the pimps and the traffickers coming here looking for them, and we don't want the violence that is associated with it in our community. That's where the protest and resistance comes from. And it's not just there at that safe house, it's everywhere that you have a domestic violence shelter or a safe house. We have, where there's only one safe house for males in the country, we have 3 safe homes for women in the entire New England area. Only 3.
And those 3, how many beds?
I think total between the 3 of them right now, 15 beds.
15 beds
that's
for all
nothing.
of New England for women.
And they're full right now.
They're always full.
And
Our
one of
safe
them,
house in Maine, that one, they have 5 beds. They turned away 20 people their first 3 weeks of being open.
and all of them have wait list. I mean,
Is St. Andre's one of those?
that's Hope Rising.
St.
Andrews.
Andre's
Rising,
has Hope Rising, yeah.
So there's and there's a wait list for these homes. So there is not enough. But the problem with it is it's hard to get one open, but it's even harder to sustain it over time because of how much money it costs to run one. You're talking anywhere between $250,000 to $450,000 a year. And most of their funding comes from private donors, comes from people on the street, comes from people that want to give to help these women, to help on their road to recovery.
But I believe that the people in Maine, if they understand what the problem actually is for Maine, not global, but if they understand in Maine what is the problem, what is the solution to the problem, I believe the community of Maine will rally and meet that need. Not Big Brother, not, but our own community helping ourselves. And that point was made a year ago when Hope Rising opened, undisclosed location, the safe house, that the area hospital rose to meet the occasion and has given free health care to all of those women up there. And the community knows that this safe house is there. They have an internship. They're teaching the kids skills, women skills. They're taking the women into the community and letting them do an internship at various jobs so that they can learn a skill. The whole community is coming together to raise up these women back up to where they should be.
You mentioned the hospital.
Yeah.
Which hospital is it?
I'm not going to tell you.
that
Because
would-
then it would give away the
location.
location. The location is,
safe
it's a
house?
safe house.
Oh,
It's
okay.
a secret.
Okay, all right,
Yeah,
all right.
yeah, so I can't tell you. But it was just, I mean, I'd love to. I'd like to brag on them.
You know, unfortunately, you know, we as a society, we have a tendency for something bad to happen, and we react to it. Oh my God, that's horrible. We should do something about this. Like what's going on right now with gun control.
Right.
But it shouldn't
All or
get
none.
it shouldn't get to that point. People should be concerned about this now
Right.
before it gets there. Well, you might have some parents watching this now that say, you know what, well, that doesn't affect me and my kids are fine. But you know what, maybe one day it will affect you. So it would
Well,
be to your
and
advantage.
the odds are that it will, because if it's 1 in 4 girls, and so that's the thing.
1 in 5 boys,
At
1 in 6.
Yeah, 1 in 5 boys, 1 in 4 girls, 1 in 5 boys, and I can hear people in my head saying those statistics aren't accurate, and I get people saying over here it's greater than that, and over here it's less than that. You know, if there's a nuclear radiation leak, do you really give a shit if it's a 10% leak or a 15% leak?
Well,
There's
we'll have to bleep you on that word.
You're gonna bleep me on that. So there's kids being abused, and it is a lot of little kids, a lot
But
of
we
little
shouldn't.
kids.
But we shouldn't be waiting until it happens. We
Right.
should be proactive
Preventative.
and preventative now.
Absolutely.
Because you know what? It could happen one day.
That's right.
God forbid that it does, but it
And it's
could.
not a stranger, and people
It's not a
people like
stranger.
to think that it's going to be a stranger. Well, I'm going to protect my child from the stranger. We just told you that you're inviting them in your house with the internet, and that the odds are of a stranger doing it is like winning that. What's the mega ball tomorrow? Is like
Mega Millions.
540 million.
How many,
gonna win,
how
by the
many
way.
incidents that we are speaking of were perpetrated by someone who was close to the
almost
family,
always.
or a family member?
Almost always. It's someone that the
Someone
child
they know.
knows and trusts, almost always. And you have that gut feeling. I mean, I can't tell you how many people I've talked to that has that gut feeling. And it's like, yeah, I just knew. Well, if you see something, you feel something, say something. And people will have a false sense of security on the registry. So, and the registry in Maine is sort of funny right now, because some towns have the registry, some towns don't. Some towns have the registry, but the boundary isn't what it should be, and everybody's trying to figure it out. And I say, okay, it's good to know, to know where the registered sex offenders are. But please keep in mind that those are the stupid ones that got caught. The smart ones are still out there and
Still perpetrating.
And also, they think it's another country. 70% of all child pornography is made in the United States. It's not made overseas, it's made right here in the United States. It takes a village. And one of I think the greatest things that we can do as a community in Maine is to talk about it. Is that cultural change will happen when we talk about it. We've all watched the History Channel, and we've seen where we were fighting for segregation, and we were women's right to vote, and it was the college studies on homosexuality was considered deviant behavior. It was classified as deviant psychology or something.
Deviant sexual behavior.
It's like, now it's like, well, no, of course it's not deviant. That's just who you are. But how did we get from where we were to where we are? There was a cultural shift. We created a new norm. Before, depression was something that people really hid, that have to go away on vacations for a while. Now people talk about, I'm having an anxiety attack. I need my Prozac. I need my whatever. There's a whole cultural shift. And as a community, we need to talk about what was done to us so that others don't feel like they're alone. We need to talk about preparing our children as they're going to camps, bringing the computer into the living room and seeing how many friends your kid has, and to be a parent, not their friend. You're going to have the rest of your life to be there.
Well, I also think, too, it's educating, the parents on this, because, parents might not be aware of any of this going on.
Right.
Because they're so busy with their jobs,
Trying
they're
to
busy
make a
getting their
living.
kids to soccer practice, to baseball practice, and it's important to make them aware of what's happening.
Many of the problems that we have in our society today were born over the fact that we were just too busy to pay attention.
Yeah, too busy to see it right in front of our faces.
We don't, I look at the relationship of people with government today, and I'm talking with somebody from government, so I have to be very careful.
Yeah, be
Touch
careful.
my words carefully.
He's packing.
But yes, there are people out there who think that, in some respects, our relationship with government has been turned upside down, and to a degree, I'll have to confess that I'm one of those people. However, I am also one of those people who say that we let it happen. We were so busy coping with life on a daily basis, we just stopped paying attention.
Yeah, I mean, even though you feel that way, like our government is like turned upside down, that's still no excuse as to why a kid should be enduring
you're right.
the pain that is inflicted on them by these predators. I mean, we need to come together for the kids and their
Absolutely.
future. There was one, if you go onto, again, the Blue Campaign website, there's these posters, awareness posters on the number, who to call, what to, basically indicators on the poster. There was one group, it was a social justice group that I handed these posters out, and they were putting them around this town. And as she was putting them up, there was another woman behind her taking them down. And when she asked her, why are you taking these down? She said, I find these offensive to my children. That's some of the attitudes that are out there.
Yep.
Instead of finding it offensive, educate yourself on how you can protect your kids
Right.
so they don't fall victim to one of these, horrific crimes.
And the predator witch hunt, we have to remember that the family unit not only has a victim, but there's also a silent partner, and there's also the predator. So in one of these dysfunctional homes that hasn't had healing or isn't healthy, there's that triangle. There's the person who knows what's going on, but is keeping their mouth shut to save the other kids or to keep a roof over their head, and they just turn a blind eye, and then the predator themselves. And if this was the Salem witch hunt, and we have a child who's living in a home that's dysfunctional, and they know that witches are being hanged and sunk, whatever, and drowned in the water, and they know that they have a witch in their home, right? Are they going to say, hey, I think my uncle, my aunt, my grandfather, my grandmother is a witch? No matter what's happening to them and the other siblings, do they really want to send that family member to be burned at the stake? No. So there is a place of compassion, mature compassion, because of course we all want to kill a predator. I mean, of course we don't, but we have to be mature and have mature compassion and zero tolerance. So if we create an environment where we can talk about this, where we take certain action steps to keep our kids safe, and we show compassion for the predator and zero tolerance, I think more kids will be apt, more silent partners will be apt to say that they have a predator in their house. Because a predator can be a great guy or a great gal and do wonderful things for the community. How many priests and people in our society and we find out that they're a predator? And we have to eliminate that behavior from our community.
Agreed. And we're coming up against the clock again.
Wow, that was quick.
That was good.
But before I ask the takeaway, I want something to sink into both of your heads. I am firmly committed, for issues that matter, that this not be a one and done show. I love having repeat guests. It makes my job that much easier because I don't have to go through the familiarization process again.
Yeah.
And if there's a topic out there that needs coverage, I want it covered, and I want it covered fully. And I don't want to stop the coverage simply because, well, we've already done that show. No,
Right.
It's a developing thing. So I'm asking both of you to not let this be? You've already answered that question. You've been on the show this
It's my second time.
Second time.
And we have BACA coming. You know, one of next Friday we have Bikers Against
That's
Child
right,
Abuse.
about BACA, which
Again,
is
exposing. So our goal is
Yep.
to expose the Maine community to the resources, tools, and skills and
but
websites necessary.
having BACA come next week does not get you off the one and done thing. You're still hooked.
Yeah.
And Peter,
Thank you.
anytime you want to use the show as a voice, as an outlet, you have my number.
Cool.
And
Thank
if you don't
very
have
much.
it,
She
I know
has it.
Catherine has it.
Thank you very much.
I would very much look forward to having you on as a guest again. And thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Catherine, I'll see you next week.
I'll see you next week.
Folks, I think you had we had a fabulous show today. What's your takeaway, Peter? You're not getting away without giving me a takeaway.
Well, first I wanted to thank you both for having me. I also want to thank my agency, the upper management, for allowing me to be here today so I can
Thank you, Upper Agency.
talk to you about what's
Yeah.
going on out in the communities. But my takeaway from this is, you know, and again, I don't know how many times I said it during the course of the show, was to educate and have an awareness of what is happening out there in the community. What is happening with your children? Take more active roles in what they're doing. That's how these things are going to be prevented.
Yep. Catherine? Your
Stop
takeaway.
having sex with children.
That's to the point.
Yeah, short and to the point.
Very good. Well,
Good, thank
thank
you.
you both very much. I think it was a great show. People out there that will be the final judges. I wish we did have some type of rating system so we can gauge just what people think about the show. But that's just my dream.
They can contact me at stoptraffickingme.org and leave their comments. If there's a different show, if there's a topic, if you've got questions for Peter or me, stoptraffickingme.org. Feel free to reach out, contact me.
Well, maybe what we can do too is even little townhouse meetings.
I would love to do a townhouse meeting.
Let's plan on it. Folks, have a great day. I think last time I checked, it was a beautiful day out there. Take advantage of it.
Bye. Moisturize, moisturize, moisturize.
Hydrate, hydrate, hydrate.
That's right.
Have a great day. Bye-bye.